didn't know there would be such great interest in a sort of travelogue discussion about important issues in Gaza, but we're very thrilled you're all here. I want to recognize Congressman Peter Welch is with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. And you notice he doesn't have a chair, and I'm feeling very guilty about that. Keith Ellison, Congressman Ellison is on his way. Brian Baird is with us. Daniel Levy, who will be offering comments, will be with us. I'm Steve Clemens. I run the Foreign Policy National Security Group at a think tank called the New America Foundation here in town. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, it says on. I will just speak louder. It's great to be with all of you. We have, as all of you know, Congressman Ellison and Congressman Baird recently visited Gaza. They have a bit to tell about this story. They went despite receiving warnings from the State Department and others about questions of safety, and went to investigate the issue on their own. Congressman Ellison is not here yet, and I'll say a few words about both gentlemen, but while we have a little bit of time, why don't we share with you the beginnings of a video clip that they took while there. Do you want to comment about it quickly?
Yeah, I'll just introduce it briefly. We visited a number of sites. We went to Sderot, Israel. We were also on the West Bank. There's no video of the West Bank, but there's images from Gaza, images from a hospital, images taken interviewing mental health professionals, both in Sderot and in Gaza, and images from an industrial area, a drive-through image, just to kind of give you a sense of what we saw, and then some images from a hospital that was burned as well, and then I think also a brief interview with the principal of the American International School, which was leveled in Gaza. So
right, and then we'll be back with the presentations
yeah.
from both our congressmen.
Both Keith and I have much more extensive information and imagery on our websites. This is sort of an edited version of key things to highlight.
So let's roll the video.
But now, as you can see, there's no. We are going to be stopping to speak to one of the ice cream and biscuit factory owner. It's been a family business of his for 30 years. His name is Dr. Yasser. We should also meet the chairman of the Palestinian Federation of Industries.
What you're seeing here is an industrial area that was largely leveled, basically just flattened. This is a hospital in Gaza, Al-Quds.
Thank you for your work.
This is the Al-Quds Hospital, a psychosocial treatment unit for children.
Get into the ceiling, man, and yeah. How did you possibly put this? Looks like a nursery. Yeah, this is the physiotherapist department. Here we have physiotherapy and here psychosocial play therapy place for the children. Please, could you say that again? It was what? This is the play therapy for psychosocial program. So we have this club belong the hospital, other for the family club, which is usually we bring the family, the kids come here for the work, and they insist to use the theater, to use the places which they are. So this what I'm looking at here. This is right here, what we would call daycare for the staff. This is where
This is the Al-Quds Hospital.
While they work. Yes. Instead of to go out, so we prefer to have a place for them instead to go every 2 or 3 hours out. And you had an art exhibition at the time it was hit. Here's the sign. No. This is after they are insist because always we have many activities there. After the attack, you had they come and they insist to do.
In the rubble, they made this beautiful art exhibition because this was a place of culture, and they didn't want to stop being like that. So they did it amongst the rubble, and these are the pictures that you see remnants from that exhibition. But it's really beautiful. It was really moving.
You see here the fire after one month. Yeah. Okay, somebody played in the sand. So you smell the burning. Yeah. Sure. And what was here, doctor? This is the same building, but from this side, you see, it's complete.
For purpose of this, would you be kind enough to just briefly repeat?
This is the administrator of the Augusta Victoria Hospital in East Jerusalem.
How long it takes them to queue up and get through?
Yes, well, there are some things that are called
hundreds and hundreds of workers of all trades, and there is absolutely no sense of emergency in that. And then you go on the other side of the terminal, then you pick up another cab or another big.
How long does this take?
This take, on average, and I have it in the presentation, no less than 90 minutes. Today, for example, my staff took 2 hours to get through this terminal.
And every non-physician staff, nurses, radiologists, technicians, therapists, each and every day,
Have to do that.
and if they didn't have to do that, which takes 90 minutes each way,
Yes,
if they didn't have to do that, how quickly could they get here?
they could come between Ramallah and Jerusalem is 18-minute drive.
So an 18-minute drive becomes a 2-hour delay. What is the additional expense if you have to take cabs?
The multiple back-to-backs, because you have to take a cab from the city to the checkpoint, from the checkpoint to the main city, from the main city, then you have to come to the hospital. So this is really quite an expense, and this is also a bigger issue usually for us.
How much would that cost on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, if you take a cab, you want to just come straight, that's about 50 shekels. This is going to be about $10+.
Each day, 10 additional dollars, 2 additional hours, and the indignities, because you want to come provide health care.
And the patient who's waiting for his operation and doesn't know when his surgery is going. We have a doctor who does this every day from Bethlehem.
You do this trip from Bethlehem every day. How long does it take you, Doctor? 90 minutes. And if it weren't for this system, how long would it take you?
You know David Cohen, who's the Inspector General of Police, because they told us it was the police who did this. Of course, they were playing the game, naming each other. Then we wrote to Amos Bilal, who's the name I'm sure you're familiar with. We wrote the Israeli police authorities. We sent another letter to the Director General of Israel asking him what happened. We wrote a second letter to the Minister of Health. We wrote the Miliband, the British Foreign Minister, who was also involved, and also a letter to Secretary Rice.
All the while, this entire time, every single day, all this expense, all this delay. From July, was it? Yeah.
So then, after all this pressure, the Israelis proposed what we call the non-solution. And the non-solution.
Narrate this briefly.
Yeah.
Go ahead and give us volume again.
Okay, yeah, I see that. And then we went back to Augustana, Victoria. You gonna hit the button? What we're about, let me just hold up for a second. What we're about to see is a grocery store in Jabalia camp, which is on the northern part of the Gaza Strip. The Jabalia camp is a place where several thousand people live, and it's a place where people, lead their lives. I personally was expecting to see bare shelves in the grocery store. But what we saw was not bare shelves. We saw, there are things on the shelves, candy bars, things like that. But what you'll hear from this gentleman is that if it were not for the tunnels being open, that they would have nothing on the shelves other than basic food items. Now, Brian and I are not advocating for the tunnels to be open. We're advocating for the crossings to be open, which we believe that if the crossings were open, you could more effectively cut down on the traffic through the tunnels, and therefore it would enhance Israeli security because we would be able to control the traffic through the tunnels, and it would improve the quality of life for Gazans as well. So this is a grocery store that people go to every day, and maybe you can roll tape.
We've got about 5 more minutes of video, then we'll talk a bit and then take questions. Need more volume.
The first one is through the terminals, Congressional terminals. In the last opening from Israel, that after the war, humanitarian access was approved by the Israeli government for the people, and you could see some food commodities, some stuff which was not available in the last 3 years now started to be available due to the humanitarian access. In addition to using the tunnels through Egypt, you will see most of these food stuff are coming through the tunnels from Egypt. For example, all these ones coming through Egypt, things. So even this one, if you have this Galaxy coming through Egypt, through the tunnels.
Because through what's allowed to come through Israel is strictly humanitarian, and these are considered luxury items. And also recently tomato paste has been determined to be a luxury item.
Along with macaroni and lentils?
Exactly. You are very well informed, I see.
I would ask him some questions about his what he's getting, from where he's getting his.
Can we say, can we thank him for allowing us to visit?
وبقول لك شكرا كثير انه انت سمحت لنا احنا نزور.
Yeah, شكرا جزيلا. Yeah, and I used to meet Keith Ellison and
Brian Baird.
yeah.
Prepare the goods and the food stuff coming through the normal, the official terminals, Kerem Shalom and others, because the stuff coming through tunnels.
Okay, folks, so that will conclude the video. I'd like to encourage those of you who feel uncomfortable clustered at the door. I apologize for the size of the room. Feel free. The Congressman has given us permission to walk behind here, and if you'd like to, I know it's clustered on the other end, but you're happy to stand behind if you like. It may be a little more comfortable. So don't worry about protocol with us, and don't be shy. Just move if you'd like. Let me just briefly introduce who we've got here today. For those of you who didn't hear before, just go right on across. I'm Steve Clemens, and you can go through this way as well. I'm Steve Clemens. I run the Foreign Policy National Security Division at the New America Foundation, which is a centrist think tank here in Washington, D.C. And I have with us today someone who's moving away from his seat. He does this. And is Congressman Rush Holt here as well? Congressman Holt, congratulations. We're glad to be here. We would have, yes. And so we have with us Daniel Levy, I'll mention first because he's with me, and directs the Middle East Task Force with Amjad Attallah. Amjad, raise your hand, at the New America Foundation. And this is really a Middle East Task Force program today. And we're honored to have Congressman Rush Holt, who's joined us, and very glad you joined us, as well as Keith Ellison, of course, representing Minnesota's 5th District. Keith is a very new member to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and of course a member of the Financial Services Committee, as well as Brian Baird. Congressman Baird, thank you for arranging the room for us today, who besides representing Washington's 3rd District since 1998, was previously chairman of the Department of Psychology at Pacific Lutheran University. I spent some time this afternoon looking at the websites of both Congressman Ellison and Congressman Baird. I didn't go on to Congressman Holt, so I don't know if there are videos and whatnot there. He might mention that. But there's a great deal of information from this particular trip that was made, in these videos that we've just shown. I was enthused to see are on Keith Ellison's site, and lots of photographs and others on Congressman Baird's site. So I would use those as resources. So without further ado, let me invite Keith Ellison to help set the stage. We'll have comments from all 3 congressmen and then reactions from Daniel Levy. Keith Ellison.
Well, let me just thank everybody for coming. This is a tremendous number of folks who've been here to show this, for us to have our presentation today. So thank you all very much. Let me also extend my great thanks to Congressman Baird, who he and I were friends before this trip, but I think we've grown a little closer even since then, and also Rush Holt, and also Senator Kerry, all of whom have gone to Gaza for the first time in about 3 years. I have one message today. Oh, Peter. Hey, Peter, how you doing there, Congressman? Peter Welsh is back there. But let me just say this. I only have one message for you today, just one, only one, and that is the crossings must open. We got to get the crossings open. The crossings have to open for 2 reasons. One is that when we open up the crossings, we can cut down on the traffic in the tunnels, and therefore make sure that nothing goes through those tunnels that will endanger Israeli security, or, by the way, Gazan security, because some of these rockets misfire and land in Gaza, by the way. But also to address the desperate humanitarian conditions that we saw in Gaza. We were only there for a day. We got there at about 9 o'clock in the morning. We ended up having to leave at around 4 o'clock. But in the course of a day, we saw the industrial infrastructure bashed to the ground. We saw the American International School, and we actually have a tape on that, bashed to the ground. Brian Baird went digging through, fishing through the rubble and pulled out the school yearbook, which showed, you know, a tremendous amount of hope and promise that the young people had, and the dedication of their teachers and the people who ran the school. In all the time that we were there, and we talked with business people, we talked with young people, we talked with medical people, we talked with everybody. Each time Brian and I told them that we were American members of Congress, and at no time did we receive anger, hostility, or derision from anyone. We were actually treated with tremendous amount of cordiality. In no time did we hear any anti-Israel comment. In fact, we heard from several ordinary citizens and business people, we want peace. We heard it from several people, and in fact, we never heard any pro-Hamas comments either. Now, you might speculate onto why and whatever was going on, but I just want to let you know that in an area where a full 750,000 of the residents are under 18 years old, we have an opportunity to help heal a very deep and divisive wound if we would dedicate ourselves to the cause of peace and do the hard work for it. You know, and I want to wrap up my comments right now by saying this. I believe that it's axiomatic that in a legislative body within the context of a democratic society, an issue for which there is no constituency to lobby, to write, to talk to policymakers, no matter how meritorious that issue may be, you will not find action. But where you have a devoted constituency to lobby an issue, no matter how small that issue is or how frivolous it may be, you will see action. What's my point? In America today, you have a very strong, active group of people who are willing to lobby for Israeli security. You also have a smaller, less well-organized group that's willing to lobby for the Palestinian side. But what, in my opinion, we lack is a constituency for peace. And we have to develop a constituency for peace, people who are willing to say, no, the United States cannot back away from the table. Yes, the United States has to be part of that solution. We're willing to lobby, write, talk to our legislators, offer legislation to make peace possible. This is a region of 300 million people, a region of 300 million people from Iraq all the way to the Maghreb. It's a beautiful place full of great people. The zero comes from here. Abraham comes from here. Jesus walked this area, and so did Muhammad. There's no reason in the world why we cannot have a thriving, prosperous region of the world if we would confront conflict in a forthright and dogged and determined way. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. I'd like to acknowledge the Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has also joined us. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me invite Brian Baird to share his thoughts.
I want to echo Keith's remarks. We had it was a very powerful trip, as you can imagine. It was a privilege to travel with Keith. I want to thank the New America Foundation for being here, all of you folks who are here. Peter Welch, Sheila, thank you. And then Rush went in just a couple days after us. He made special arrangements after we were there to say he wanted to be there and see what we had seen as well. And, of course, John Kerry went. And two things I want to do. One is put the context of this trip into a somewhat broader context. Keith and I were in the region. We were originally invited to speak at a conference on Islam in the U.S., and we were in Doha, Qatar for 3 days speaking to people from around the world, not only in the Islamic community, but broader faith community, social, political, business community was there. We also went, while on this trip, to Jerusalem, to Sderot, and to Jordan, and to the West Bank. So this was part of a broader trip, and this was certainly not either of our first trip to the region at all. We've been there on a number of occasions. I also want to acknowledge the tremendous work being done by the humanitarian groups here. We have folks from World Vision here. There are folks here from Augusta Victoria Hospital. We met with Mercy Corps people, with UNRWA and others. There are some really fine people really working very hard in difficult circumstances to help people out, and they deserve our support and respect, and we were grateful for the chance to go in. Keith summarized it very, very well. The challenge is to somehow do validity and honesty to what we have seen and experienced without at the same time somehow being perceived, as is easy to do, as saying, well, you're taking one side against the other. There are clearly, in my judgment, wrongs on both sides, but that doesn't necessarily justify one action or another. What Keith said is accurate. We witnessed in Gaza destroyed schools, hospitals, an industrial area, an entire industrial area that had been leveled, people who'd lost their homes, etc. Now, I should also say we went to Sderot. We met with people who we saw the collection of rockets that they have been subject to over time, absolutely unacceptable. We met with a psychiatrist who works with people who are dealing with the stress of being shelled by those rockets on a regular or irregular basis. And we talked to people in civil defense, etc. The challenge, though, is to, I think, two questions. One, what is the immediate need in Gaza, the immediate humanitarian need? How do we get the support to those people who need it? And Keith mentioned opening the borders. It's not enough to just throw money at the air. Now, I want to, first of all, applaud President Obama, Secretary of State Clinton, Special Envoy Senator Mitchell. What has been done in the last couple of months gives a lot of people a lot of hope there because they've seen real investment. But the money itself will not be of use unless we find a way to have some kind of rapprochement between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. That's going to have to work together in some way, and unless you can get things back and forth across the border. And it won't work in the long run, either in the West Bank or in Gaza, unless some fundamental other changes are made, and we believe those changes have to be made as well. You saw the clip from Augusta Victoria Hospital. That's in East Jerusalem, serves Palestinians in East Jerusalem and West Bank. There are plenty of issues in Gaza, plenty of issues in the West Bank, obviously plenty of issues for Sderot and others as well. We've got to find a way to solve those issues, to provide immediate help. And my assertion would be that what has been done in Gaza, and also, for that matter, what's been done in Sderot, is not moving things forward. Rocketing innocent civilians does not move the peace process forward, but neither does what we have seen as a response in Gaza. My own belief is that what is happening there is a threat to our security, which, given this pin, should be my highest priority. This is our congressional pin. U.S. security and U.S. integrity around the world should be our highest priority, but neither do I think it is adding to the security or the prosperity of the people in that region, and therefore I think we need to seriously reevaluate the policies that we've seen played out. And with that, we'll be happy to address some questions. And Rush, did you want to offer any comments on what you've seen? Please.
Thank you, Congressman Baird. Congressman Rush Holt.
Thanks very much. I didn't come actually prepared to speak, but Keith and Brian invited me to join them, and I'm pleased to do so. I visited Gaza the same weekend, actually, that Brian and Keith did, and Senator Kerry, beg your pardon. And of course, in a one-day visit, you can only observe so much and only see part of the picture. There's no question, as Brian said, you can find wrongs on both sides. You can actually find much to love on both sides, too. What I wanted to talk about was the evidence rather than the long-established ideology. What I observed in that visit. And by the way, I never feared for my safety. I only found friendly children. I only found people who were not looking for a fight, but looking to rebuild their lives and get on with raising their kids and so forth. In one day's visit, you can't really, based on your observations, discuss the justification for Israeli military action, pro or con. I have my own opinions about that, and many of us do. You can't really, in one day's observation, address the question of is the military doctrine of the Israelis that led to the kind of military action and really total devastation in some places. Again, I have my own opinions on that. But what I can address on the basis of what I saw that day is what Brian and Keith have addressed, is the need for humanitarian aid to get in now. And not simply humanitarian aid. I would include in that the category of reconstructive aid. And not just aid in dollars pledged at Sharm el-Sheikh, but actual sacks of concrete and varieties of food and medical supplies. After the visit, I talked with the Prime Minister of Israel, who said, well, there is no limitation on medical supplies. And yet, at the same time, the UN organization, the refugee organization, said, we have had an X-ray machine sitting outside the border for a year now that we've been trying to get in. So there clearly is a role of, let's call it mediation, to help with the communication here. There clearly is a role for outside help. I mean, certainly right now, we talked about Augusta Victoria Hospital. It's the World Lutheran Organization that does that. There are a number of other religious and international organizations that are helping. The United States is not helping enough. We should have been involved in stopping the rockets. I too went to Sderot. In fact, rockets came out of Gaza the day I was in Gaza. Now, I didn't see where they came from. I didn't see any launches. I didn't even see any contrails. I didn't see where they hit. But it is still going on, and the United States could and should be doing more to stop that. The United States could and should be doing more to help with the communication on the reconstructive aid. The ostensible reason, again, from the Prime Minister of Israel is if we let them rebuild, the sacks of concrete and the rebar will only go to make bunkers and launching pads for rockets. Well, in fact, as my colleagues here can attest, you can get bags of cement in Gaza right now. And so if you wanted to use it to build a launch pad, you could. The problem is it's coming through the tunnels at greatly inflated prices where we are enriching outlaws rather than having normal crossing through safe inspection and security. So there's a great deal that we can and should be doing, not just declaring that some amount of money will be spent for aid, but to see that the aid really gets through. And by the way, Brian, when I visited the American school, I found, appropriately enough, I mean, you found a baseball book. I found a science textbook, shredded, blown apart. And it was so sad because this American school, nominally American, but of course these are all Gazan students, they, in recent years, had taken down the American flag because they were subject to attack by Muslim extremists. And so they didn't want the American flag to be up there as a target so that the students would not be harmed.
We found this great book, literally in the rubble, and it was a book about baseball. And it had little vignettes in it. It had to be the teacher's edition because there were little sticky notes inside. And one of the sticky notes was on an article about Jackie Robinson. And it had this wonderful little question the teacher had written, what about this paragraph tells you the meaning of the word prejudice? And it was this article about how Jackie got cleated when he, and there were all these vignettes. I mean, how quintessentially American can you get than to try to use baseball to teach tolerance and compassion? There's a powerful interview on both Keith's website and mine of the principal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Congressman Holt. Now I've asked Daniel Levy just to take a few minutes. questions, and stick to one question you have out of the three, and keep it brief.
Steve, let me first acknowledge we've been joined by Representative Andre Carson. We're very grateful that he's here.
Thank you so much. Abdurrahim.
The view from the Arab world is that the United States Congress has been decidedly pro-Israel through thick and thin for decades. To what extent do you feel that your trip to Gaza, first of all, and this particular event here in Congress marks a real shift in the debate about the Israeli-Palestinian issue?
I want to emphasize, first of all, that I think both Keith and I do not see what we've done and our comments about what's happened in Gaza is in any way anti-Israel. What we're trying to say is that we think this was as a humanitarian crisis. We don't agree with the military strategy on the ground. I think far too much was destroyed, and I don't think that's a productive strategy. But you know, I have good friends who criticize me, and I learn from that. And I think it is time for us to see that you can criticize a friend and not be considered anti that friend. And again, my first priority has to be the United States of America. But I think the strategies that we have seen, that both in the West Bank and in Gaza, are not in the best interest of Israel itself. Even if you say, well, I'm adamantly pro-Israel, there's a legitimate question about whether a collective punishment type approach, as Dan described, is actually building friends. You know, 50%, Keith's very fond of saying this, and will say it more eloquently than I, but 50% of the population there is under 16, is it, Keith?
Yeah, about 48% is under 16, and about 56% is under 18.
My long-term strategy would be to try to say, let's try to make as many friends of young people as we can, and I don't think that's happening right now. So I think maybe there's somewhat of a turning point. The other thing I'll say is, you know, you see resolutions that may go predominantly in one direction, but my experience in talking to colleagues is many colleagues in the Congress wish that the resolutions were more measured, wish that they were more nuanced, that they were more critical on both sides, and they haven't been, and I personally would like to see that change. But the numbers oftentimes of the final vote don't reflect some of the underlying sentiments that people have. Keith, you want to?
No, I'll just take the next question so we can get around more.
The situation is as follows. Gaza can be accessed, obviously, like anywhere in the world, via the air. You could bring stuff in. Gaza can also be accessed via the sea. Gaza is on the sea. Gaza can also be accessed via Egypt, at the Rafah border crossing. And then there are 5 crossings from Israel into Gaza. Historically, those were the only ways in. During the times of the peace agreements, there was a deal reached to open a Gaza airport, and we briefly had a Gaza airport, and to build a Gaza seaport. We never got far enough in building the seaport for that to be open. With the collapse of the peace process, part of the agreement between Israel, the Palestinians, and the international community was no attempt to go for an airport or a seaport anymore. Rule those out. You have the Rafah border crossing. According to an arrangement reached between Israel, the Palestinians, and the United States in November of 2005, called the Access and Movement Agreement, Rafah was only to be for minimal human and tourist traffic. Rafah is not a commercial crossing. The agreement was you don't use Rafah, the Egyptian border, for commercial goods. Any commercial goods coming from Egypt go through the Israeli border and then through those 5 Israeli crossings. The 5 Israeli crossings are designated for specific purposes. So the main issue still today, unless there's going to be an airport, seaport, or a change in policy on Rafah, is that anything can get in and out of Gaza only in 2 ways. Legally and in a monitored fashion, through the crossings via Israel, or illegally and in an unmonitored fashion through the tunnels. I think the message from here has been, use the modalities at your disposal, the crossings that can be monitored from Israel into Gaza and vice versa, rather than making everything go through the tunnels. Right now, you have between 130 and 200 trucks a day of supplies going in, according to international humanitarian agencies, to meet the minimum needs, not of subsistence, but of allowing society to breathe. You need 500 trucks a day. Plus, in addition to that, you need to open those crossings open to window frames, glass, cement, all the things that would help Gaza not just stabilize at subsistence level, but begin to rebuild the destruction. So I think it's basically the ask is, fulfill the 2005 Condoleezza Rice negotiated Access and Movement Agreement.
If I may add to that, one of the things that I learned, and I would appreciate confirmation or correction on this, is that the crossing that is best equipped to screen the trucks for contraband is not open. And that doesn't make sense to me.
My understanding is that the Kearney crossing, that there's a conveyor belt that allows wheat products to go through, kind of a conveyor belt, but other things are not getting through. But let me just read to you for what an Israeli official was reported to have said just recently. This is a quote that was pulled out of a Haaretz article recently, just today, in fact. Even though the pasta issue was solved last week, this entire episode has made us look ridiculous in the eyes of the world, a senior Jerusalem source said today. It's too bad we have to wait for pressure from Europe and the United States, and we couldn't rescind the measure on our own. Let's just say this, folks. In Israel, it's okay to talk about this stuff. Only here does a politician have to fear derision and attack from speaking what is obvious.
Why don't we just repeat the question rather than chasing around? We'll repeat the question. Sally, it's good to see you again. We saw you in Doha. It's Sally Quinn from the Washington Post.
Palestinians talking on panels, and they would be very circumspect about Hamas. Then you would have dinner with them or lunch with them, and they would always be very critical of Hamas. And they would talk about how all of the Muslim states really were very down on Hamas, were not supportive of Hamas, and that they didn't see how they could control Hamas. And I was saying, why don't the Arab states give more money and more support, and the other Islamic states, to Palestine? And they say, because Hamas will steal the money. We don't want to give it to them because we know what will happen. I mean, it's like what one of you were saying. And Daniel Levy, you were talking about how the PR, we keep saying, well, obviously the Gazans are going to turn against Hamas because they keep lobbing these missiles across to Israel, which you'd think they would turn against Hamas for that, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And I don't understand the PR aspect of this. What did you all find? Did you find that the Gazans privately are angry at Hamas, or are supportive of Hamas? And do you find that other members of the Arab and the Islamic community are supportive of Hamas?
You know, I'd like to hear Brian's views on the subject, but I heard Gazans focused on their survival needs day to day. I heard Gazans talking about, I need a job, I don't want to sleep in this tent because when the water comes down, I'm going to be sleeping in a puddle. That is what people are focused on. And I'll say this, you know, remember Hamas threw Fatah out at the point of arms, and then Israel, which just got through with this war, couldn't dislodge them. So in a community where 56% of the people are under 18, we believe that they should rise up and do what neither the United States or Fatah could do. People, it won't happen. We've got to find another way to deal with this issue.
It is in the bathroom.
Let me just
You
address.
use your lungs?
Hang on, just one sec. Let me just address one aspect of it. So we didn't, in fairness, we didn't really get enough time. We would have obviously liked to spend much more time there. But I agree with exactly what Keith was saying. Most people we talked to said, look, we've got to rebuild here. It was not about politics. It was about where do we find shelter, warmth, feed our families. But there was some interesting discussion of the long-term psychological impacts on the kids. And I know in Sderot that's a big issue as well, and we met with a psychiatrist there. But there's compelling discussion on our website of an interview with a psychologist in the mental health center there. He said, look, you know, the kids here, we're desperately working to get these kids to have some positive hope for the future. And yet when they see their parents humiliated on a daily basis, when their parents cannot protect them, when they're told to flee your house and then the place they flee their house to also gets shelled, when they see the American school, which prided itself on the leaders of tomorrow, that's sort of their motto of the school, in rubble, he said at some point we see kids coming in talking about they want to be suicide bombers. Now that's a tragedy, and I think we really need to ask in terms of the long-term impact of this strategy. I don't mean just the strategy of the recent shelling and the attack. I mean the broader strategy, what the implications for that in terms of the longer-term security of not just Israel or the Palestinian Authority, but the broader region. We heard at the Islamic Conference and elsewhere a grave concern that if we don't proactively reward moderation, extremism will be seen as the most viable alternative, and that will spread throughout the region.
You just acknowledge that, Congressman.
By the way, if I could just say, we heard that same message in Amman, Jordan, that the moderate elements need some more support, and that if we foreclose those avenues, then the alternative may be embraced. Oh, and also Congressman Kucinich is here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Yes, if